Welcome to the Pro Tickers Deep Dive, your go-to breakdown of the stock movers and major stories at the close of global trading. Let's dive into today's market action. Today we're embarking on a really crucial geopolitical deep dive. It's sending ripples across the global economy. China's intricate position in the escalating Iran conflict amidst persistent U.S. pressure.
Yeah, it's a big one.
We're going to unpack how Beijing is navigating this, incredibly delicate situation, what it actually means for global oil markets, and, well, how it reveals the shifting landscape of global power.
We've got some fascinating sources to draw on here.
We do, and we're ready to extract the most important insights for you. Okay, let's unpack this complex geopolitical chessboard.
Right.
Tensions are definitely flaring in the Middle East. You've got recent U.S. airstrikes, for instance, targeting Iranian-linked facilities in places like Syria and Iraq, following attacks on American bases.
And at the same time,
Exactly. Simultaneously, Israel's escalating military posture, particularly its recent operations in Gaza, and that increasingly sharp rhetoric about Iran's nuclear program. It clearly raises the stakes across the whole region.
it really does.
And here's where it gets really compelling. Why all eyes are turning squarely to Beijing. Why are they such a critical player in this whole unfolding drama?
Well, China holds, as you said, a truly unique and delicate position here.
Right.
It's not just Iran's largest trading partner. It's also a key, long-standing importer of Iranian oil. That's crucial.
And the U.S., while they're leading the diplomatic and military actions, they've been quite explicit, haven't they, that China has a significant role to play in pressuring Iran.
Very explicit, especially concerning the potential closure of the Strait of Hormuz.
Which, as we know, is just a vital global oil artery.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating here is how former President Trump framed this back at the NATO summit. It gives you a glimpse into the strategic thinking.
What did he say?
Well, he publicly declared confidence, perhaps optimistically, that the Israel-Iran conflict was over. But then he made a truly provocative statement.
Oh.
He hinted he could stop China from buying Iranian oil, yet he deliberately chose not to. He actually said, and I quote, "They're in the oil business. I could stop it if I wanted."
Wow. So what does that imply then?
Well, it implies a strategic decision, doesn't it? To allow China continued access effectively to keep Iran economically afloat, maybe just enough.
But why, given the sanctions push?
It seems like a delicate balancing act. Keep Iran viable enough to prevent total collapse, which could lead to chaos, but also maintain a potential economic lever over Beijing, using China as a sort of indirect manager of Iranian stability.
That really puts Beijing in a complicated spot.
Incredibly complicated, because on one hand, China has publicly condemned the U.S. strikes, positions itself as wanting regional stability, but on the other hand,
Their relationship with Iran is deep.
very deep, financially, strategically.
Hmm.
Cemented by that 25-year cooperation agreement signed back in 2021. And it's a partnership that actually deepened significantly during the Iran-Iraq War. There's real history there.
Okay, that's a profound strategic insight. It really reveals layers beyond just simple sanctions. So, given this intricate geopolitical backdrop, let's zero in on, well, the oil.
The tangible piece.
Exactly, the most tangible piece on that board. A crucial question here is, just how reliant is China on Iranian oil?
Right.
Currently, China imports roughly 1.1 million barrels of oil per day from Iran. Yeah, that's about 10% of its overall daily intake.
10%.
Yeah, so while it's certainly not China's single largest source, it is a substantial slice of its energy strategy. And crucially, this ongoing dependence gives Tehran the revenue it critically needs, right? Especially with those international sanctions.
Absolutely critical revenue. And that raises the next question. Does China truly have viable alternatives if those supplies were, say, disrupted? The short answer is yes, they absolutely do. They get significant volumes from Saudi Arabia and Russia. Both could realistically ramp up exports if Iranian supplies were somehow cut off.
Okay.
Plus, there's a crucial long-term trend you have to consider. Chinese demand for oil is actually expected to peak around 2027. That's according to the International Energy Agency.
So they're looking beyond oil anyway.
It signals a strategic pivot, towards renewables in the long run, reducing their future reliance on oil imports overall.
Interesting.
But if we connect this back to the bigger picture, it's not just about the barrels of oil themselves or even immediate energy security.
Right.
As one analyst shrewdly put it, there is a diplomatic advantage in having friends in the Middle East. This is about soft power as much as hard commodities.
Explain that a bit more.
Well, China's alliance with Iran, it enhances its image as a champion of the global south, the developing nations across Asia, Africa, Latin America.
Yeah.
China wants to lead this group as a counterweight to Western influence. So, by cultivating these alliances, China doesn't just secure resources, it actively builds a bloc of nations that see Beijing as perhaps a more reliable, less interventionist partner than Washington.
Bolstering its long-term vision for a multipolar world.
Exactly. It's a long game.
That's a crucial point about diplomatic advantage and global positioning. It really highlights that blend of economic and strategic motives. But, even as Beijing projects its soft power, it's still susceptible to hard realities, isn't it? Especially critical choke points.
Definitely.
So let's zoom in on a flashpoint everyone is watching. The Strait of Hormuz, this narrow channel, vital for 20% of the world's oil. It's more than just an economic choke point. It's a profound strategic flashpoint.
Huge implications if it closes.
Absolutely. Iran has repeatedly threatened to block the strait in retaliation for U.S. military action. That would be catastrophic for the global economy. Markets would go haywire. And in direct response, Secretary of State Marco Rubio specifically called on China to step in, to dissuade Tehran from such a, potentially devastating move.
What was his reasoning?
He noted that, quote, Beijing depends heavily on the strait for its oil, and he didn't mince words, calling any closure economic suicide for Iran itself. Strong language.
Very strong. And it's clear Beijing's influence over Tehran is significant. Their economic and strategic ties run deep.
But
it's much less clear how far China is actually willing to go to actively enforce regional stability, especially when military conflict is involved.
right, they mediated between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which was big.
A major achievement, yes, showed their growing diplomatic clout.
Oh.
But their public role in the current conflict has been remarkably subdued.
Just statements at the UN?
Pretty much statements, but largely avoiding deep entanglement or taking a more assertive public stance. They seem to be walking a very, very fine line.
That dynamic, subtle influence versus overt action. It's fascinating. And it does reveal the limits of power, maybe. This situation also raises broader questions about global power dynamics, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
For years, we've seen China as the rising global challenger to U.S. dominance, steadily increasing its economic, its diplomatic reach. But this current crisis, in some ways, it seems to reveal a persistent power gap, particularly when it comes to military reach, that ability to project force globally.
That's a key point. As one geopolitical analyst put it very directly, the U.S. has the capability to strike anywhere in the world and has shown it will act decisively when its interests are at stake.
Whereas China?
China, by contrast, has limited ability to project significant military power far beyond its immediate borders. Think about the logistics, the resupply for a major naval fleet far from home, the intelligence networks needed for precision strikes.
It's a different scale.
It's a huge disparity. It underscores the continued dominance of the U.S. on the global stage, especially in matters of hard power, rapid response. It's a stark contrast.
And while the Middle East is dominating the headlines, dominating market talk right now, it's important for us, for you listening, to remember that Taiwan remains the overarching concern for Chinese military planners.
Crucial context.
The U.S. regularly sails warships through the Taiwan Strait. American military presence in the Pacific is robust. It's a constant reminder of strategic priorities way beyond the Middle East.
You're absolutely right to bring up Taiwan. According to the experts we're looking at, the U.S. strike in Iran isn't likely to fundamentally change Beijing's long-term strategic calculations regarding Taiwan.
It doesn't mean the U.S. is shifting focus.
Doesn't seem so, but it certainly reinforces a crucial point. The U.S. remains the only power truly capable of executing these global military operations at scale. The logistics, the intelligence, the sustained political will.
The significant strategic advantage.
And one that definitely shapes how other nations perceive the global balance of power.
Okay. So given all these complexities, and as we look at the close of trading today, what does this all mean for what comes next, for China and Iran specifically?
Well, short term, China appears to be taking a very calculated wait-and-see approach.
Playing it cool.
Pretty much. It's state-owned firms, private investors. They're certainly poised to assist in rebuilding Iran, things like infrastructure, telecoms, if those international sanctions ease up.
So things like railways, ports, 5G.
Exactly. Big projects. However, Chinese companies will almost certainly steer clear of sensitive nuclear or defense-related projects.
Why is that?
They'll want to carefully avoid any direct confrontation or anything that looks like violating international norms, which could bring on secondary sanctions from Washington. They're playing it safe, focusing on commercially viable, less controversial sectors.
Makes sense. And longer term.
Longer term, China is expected to deepen ties with Iran where possible, mainly through robust economic diplomacy.
Enhancing influence without direct confrontation.
That's the goal, strategic hedging, maintain leverage without incurring significant risks, but
There's a but.
always a but. Its noticeable hesitance to actively defend Iran during these recent strikes raises an important question.
Right.
Other nations are surely watching this.
What question is that?
What does this mean for the reliability of China's global alliances, especially among other developing nations who are constantly weighing the costs and benefits of siding with Beijing versus Washington?
So it's a test of China's reliability as a partner.
A key reliability test, absolutely, for its image on the global stage.
Wow. The Iran-Israel conflict. It really had become more than just a regional flashpoint, hasn't it? It's a global stress test.
Yeah.
Alliances, energy security, geopolitical influence, it's all in the mix.
It really is.
And China's cautious response, it highlights both the leverage it holds, but also, critically, the limits of its global reach. For now, Beijing's best strategy might just be staying in the shadows.
Quietly maintaining those economic ties.
Exactly. While letting Washington bear the risks of military engagement. But as the balance of global power continues to shift, well, each conflict like this brings a clearer picture, doesn't it? Who leads, who follows, and who's watching very carefully from the sidelines.
A fascinating dynamic to keep watching.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Pro Tickers Deep Dive. Stay sharp and stay informed.